Week 0 gave us a taste of college football, kind of an ugly taste, but hey, we had guys on the field and some pads popping, so it was fun to see. And of course, USC and Notre Dame gained most of the attention, although we had some better action among the group of 5. We're going to talk some college football for the next few minutes. We got Zach Smith jumping on board with us from Menace to Sports. So you guys know the deal. I'm sure most of you, if not all, are aware. Menace to Sports right here on YouTube. Check out Zach. It's every Monday through Friday at noon Eastern time, right, Zach?
Yep, noon every day.
There we go. Good stuff. It's great stuff there with you breaking down college football as only you can do. So I'm going to hit you with a few things that are on my mind as we enter week 1 here, Zach. One would be, of course, let's do everything we can with Ohio State and get that out of the way. So it's Devin Brown, it's Kyle McCord, and probably doesn't surprise you that in the chat that we do here on a daily basis, some things that you say kind of filter and make their way to me because I see it here all the time. So you are on board with Devin Brown. Now, is that basically you saying, hey, I've seen these guys play, I know their skill sets, I'm Devin Brown, I'm on that side? Or is that more or less maybe a little bit of that, but also you thinking that that's the way the coaches are going to go?
Well, so initially I jumped on the Devin Brown train probably like February. And that's just me kind of watching both kids' high school tape, talking to some people that you know how they performed last year as CJ was doing his deal as the starting quarterback. So I really all conversation that I heard was they were dead even. And so my point back in February was if you have 2 kids that are dead even right now, one of them has been there for 2 years and is a lesser athlete, that tells me Devin Brown's got to be the guy, right? He's only had a year in the program. He's a better athlete. If it's even close, he wins. So that was just my thought, just as a former football coach initially. But then I talked to several people that are very, very, I don't know how to put it without just saying who it is. They know. And 40 out of 45 practices, Devin Brown graded out higher, had a higher completion percentage. Now, granted, this was after a couple beverages. It was floated to me that Devin Brown's going to win an effing Heisman. And this is not from a fan or just like the janitor. These are people that are heavily involved. And so I was walked, and they also said, do what you want with that. And so I said, well, you know what I'm going to do with that. I'm going to send shockwaves through the Buckeye beat. And that's what happened. And now, you know how it goes with me. Everyone, either people are like, oh, he definitely knows, or it's like, no one talks to him. He's a bad guy. It's like, all right, yeah, I made it up. It was all for clicks.
So yeah, this is going to be fascinating to see what plays out in regards to which direction these goes, because we've seen it over the last 2 years at Michigan and how Jim Harbaugh handled it. I don't expect Ryan Day to handle it similarly, although we are just days away from the game. And Ryan Day makes the comment about 2 weeks ago that going into that final week of practice, he said, basically, I'm going to name a starter and we're going to give him 70% of the reps. And here we are 4 days before the game and we don't know.
Yeah. It's honestly mind-blowing to me, knowing what I know about the situation. And it sounds like this is Ryan doesn't want to return to the year he had Justin Fields and 2 walk-on quarterbacks, right? He doesn't want to have no backup and Kyle check out or decide to sit out because he's going to transfer. And so he's kind of placating and trying to keep Kyle happy as much as he can to keep him on roster, which I disagree with more than I disagree with almost anything in the world. I think that if Devin Brown is better, which all reports are he is, you have to invest every asset and minute you can into Devin Brown with the ones. And then if Kyle doesn't like being the 2, he needs to leave. That's just what it should be. And it feels like they're trying to keep Kyle engaged. And then, with that, you're going to create a secondary issue, right? Because Kyle, I've been very high on Kyle McCord. I just think Devin's slightly better. And so he should be the quarterback. I'm not even saying Kyle McCord couldn't be an NFL quarterback. I think he's very talented. But if he goes out and they split time at Indiana and Kyle lights it up because he's got an incredible arm talent, you're going to create a bigger controversy when you yourself, as the head coach, who the better player is. So I just disagree with it entirely.
So thinking who the better player is out of the two. You don't go into the season thinking, okay, I want to see it play out on the field, though, and let it happen, because even if you believe that Devin Brown's a better, and when I say you, I mean as Ryan Day believe that Devin Brown's a better quarterback, you don't want to see a situation where, again, inferior opponents, either one of them could light up the next three opponents that they see. You just don't want to put yourself in that situation.
No, yeah, absolutely not. And ultimately, I would imagine, and I haven't talked to Ryan. He's not my source. I'll go ahead and get that out there. But I would imagine Ryan is just banking on, because Kyle's done well. It's not like Kyle lost the job. Devin just went and took it. And so I would imagine he's anticipating, or at least hoping, that whether it's one game, two game, or all three preseason games before they have to play Notre Dame, he's hoping that it's going to play out just like it's played out all training camp and all spring, where Devin is just better, has better completion percentage. The offense moves better with him at the helm. And he can look at Kyle and say, look, you're a fantastic player, but this kid is just operating our offense a little bit better. And we're going to need that when you go play a team like Notre Dame.
Because usually the dilemma for a coach, and I'm sure you've been in this situation a million times, where you're kind of thinking in the back of your mind, not that you favor one over the other in terms of personality and who you get along with, just football evaluation. If this guy hits his ceiling, that's the guy, versus this guy's doing all the right things and he's making all the right decisions and the right plays, regardless of the position. And he's ahead of him, but it would be great to see him get it.
Yeah.
And doesn't even seem like we're at that situation where Kyle McCord's got the offense down and he's making the right decisions, but Devin Brown's this freak athlete that would be great to have that dimension to the offense. It's that Devin Brown's actually outplaying him.
Well, and that's when I knew it was over. I knew it was over because it's always been what it was, right? Devin is more of a playmaker, but Kyle's just this pure passer. He's just, it's like poetry in motion. When I found out that Devin Brown had a higher completion percentage in training camp than Kyle McCord on all but 4 practices, I knew it was over. It's over. The kid is out throwing the thrower, and he's a good athlete. There's just no way. I'm in disbelief that we don't have a starting quarterback named right now.
Folks, you guys know where to go on a daily basis. And if you're not aware, it's Menace to Sports right here on YouTube. It's at noon Eastern time with Zach. And I apologize. I'm going to say this right out in front of everyone, because your sidekick there, Robin, he is phenomenal. What's his name?
Chris
is phenomenal. And Chris, man, I'm going to give a shout out to Chris, which I never do, but Chris DM'd me when the Big Ten denied me Big Ten media credentials and was like, hey, I'm a big fan, love your stuff. This is screwed up. And we eventually talked to the Big Ten, and they found out what we do and everything, and they got that straightened out, and we went to Big Ten Media Day. So I so much appreciate Chris for being a good guy and just saying, hey, we got you, we support you, we love what you're doing. So good stuff from Chris. Appreciate you. And man, he provides a great sidekick. You guys go back and forth, and it's really fun stuff on your show every day. We'll stay with Ohio State here for a second, because I'm hearing, and this is no shock, that Carnell Tate is the guy that people expected him to be. And it's funny because I released Big Ten wide receiver rankings, which of course I bow my knee to you evaluating any football players, but especially wide receiver. But I released my rankings in the spring, and I basically said Ohio State's got the 3 best wide receivers in the Big Ten. And that includes Julian Fleming at 3. And now I made a statement a couple of days ago. I said, shoot, they probably have the 4 best wide receivers in the Big Ten. And we're just hearing that he is just going to be the next guy.
Yeah, I mean, the same conversation where I found out about Devin Brown, just how dominant he's been. The comment was also, it was a very dramatic conversation, if you can't tell. We're talking about Heisman's, and then the next statement was thrown out that Carnell Tate is the best freshman receiver that has come to Ohio State since Ryan Day arrived. And I was like, I mean, that's a bold statement for almost any school, let alone the school that had Garrett Wilson as a freshman, Chris Olave as a freshman, Marv as a freshman in the Rose Bowl. Like, that's a bold statement. Jackson Smith and Jigba. I mean, but the kid is just dynamite. I mean, he has been dominant as a freshman. Now he's not, we're not talking better than Marv, nothing crazy, but even Marv said in his interview, he said, he is better than I was going into last season. And that's unreal to think about because Marv had the second best season in all of college football behind Jalen Hyatt. So they have really, really high expectations for Carnell Tate. I'm sure, like most receivers, most freshman receivers, it's going to be like kind of an ebb and flow. It's not just going to be domination from week 1 to the end of the year. But I would bet you a lot of money by midseason to late in the season, that kid is wide receiver 3 for the Buckeyes.
Folks, we get a Big Ten show every Monday at 6 o'clock Eastern time. So join us. We go live and we take your calls. The Big Ten live show here every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. I don't know. And as you mentioned off the top, no, this is before we started to record. I try to keep track of everyone. I'm covering everyone, doing a zillion live streams. I don't know that there is a guy with a target on him like Jim Knowles going into this season. Is there any way for you to feel better or worse about what he's got going? And I asked Ryan Day this at Big Ten Media Days. I said, how much of correcting this defense is going to be getting the athletes to do what Jim Knowles wants them to do, recognizing coverages and plays better and better technique, all those things? Or is it a combination of that? Of course, you always push the athletes to be better, but Jim Knowles kind of recognizing that he needs to tweak his scheme at times.
Yeah. I think it's the old dichotomy, right? You have to ask your players to do something they can do at a high level. And I think that the problem Ohio State has always had, and it's changed a little bit. Penn State's a little better. Michigan's obviously relevant and has beaten them twice. But I used to tell my players all the time, you will get away with so much in 9 or 10 of the games. But in the other 2, it's going to bite you in the butt. And I think that's kind of what happened with the defense. They got away with doing so much schematically because they were so much more talented than their opponent in their first, really 10 games. When they went to play Michigan and Georgia, they couldn't execute at the same level because they got away with playing with poor fundamentals, not tackling exactly how Jim Knowles wanted to. You saw it against Michigan. They bring a zero pressure. He throws a little stop route short of the chains. You tackle the kid. It's 4th down. They're punting the ball. You miss the tackle. There's nobody left. It's a 60-yard touchdown. And so it's those little things that they didn't do well last year. And I look for this year, those little things to get done. I think Ohio State's going to have a top 10 defense. Sonny Styles is Isaiah Simmons 2.0, the kid from Clemson, that safety linebacker that you're just like, I don't know, God spilled the talent beaker in that one when he made it. And then I think Davison Igbinosun getting added, a freshman all-SEC corner from Ole Miss that has that attitude. Ohio State's secondary hasn't had the attitude that we had when we had Garyon Conley and Denzel Ward and Marshawn Lattimore. They had a chip on their shoulder, like an attitude, like they were pissed off all the time. I felt like we had a bunch of nice kids that were talented playing secondary. And I think Davison brings that chip on their shoulder back. So I'm really excited to watch them. I think their defensive line is 8 deep. I mean, you're talking 2 deep across the board, and all 8 of them are great players. I'm really excited to watch this defense play.
Zach, I don't know if you can see the screen here. I'm going to blow up this tweet. I had some fun with this one this week. So basically, as I'm sure it's the same thing with your chat, people can't get enough talking Ohio State, Michigan every day of the year, arguing about it. Yeah. And I basically said, I've said this a zillion different ways, but if you boil it all down, hey, if you're under 3 years old, bow your chest, have a good time if you're a Michigan fan, or if you're over 100. But if you're between 3 and 100, and I have Michigan fans all over me for this, but I'm like, debate me, tell me where I missed it here, because winning percentage, national championships, NFL draft selections, first round selections, major bowl wins, top 10 finishes, anything you want to throw out there, Ohio State's got it the last 100 years. Yeah. So be mad, but what, that's the deal.
There's no doubt. It's really, obviously I've grown up in this rivalry, and it was always, other than Michigan back in like the 20s when they were so dominant, if you fast forward to somewhat modern football, like the Woody Hayes era moving forward, it was really a back and forth 50-50 battle. Like my grandfather was a head coach for 9 years. He was 5-4. Woody was similar, around a little over 500, but it was a back and forth. You had the 10-year war with him and Bo. And the 90s, Michigan fans got jaded because John Cooper just couldn't beat him. I think he won 2 out of 11 years. And then after that happened, when Jim Tressel walked in the door, it was what, 20 years of dominance, pure dominance. And now Michigan's kind of swung the tide back. But there's really, as a Michigan fan, there's only been one era in anyone that's alive's lifetime where they were the team. And that was the 90s. Other than that, it's been Ohio State year in, year out. And like you said, or if they're three, if you're three, you also feel dominant.
Yeah, and even during the 90s, for much of that, they weren't the team. They were the team on that Saturday.
No
they
doubt.
they pulled off the upset to their credit. Hey, they pulled off against some really good Ohio State teams, 95, 96, 98 that should have, or 95, 96 that should have won those games. But I just have a little bit of fun with that. And we give Michigan all their due. I probably have more Michigan fans actually watching than Ohio State fans, actually. And so I appreciate my Michigan fans, but I just sometimes have to lay it out there. And sometimes we'll throw out a tweet, dumb fan base of the day. And I've done that against Ohio State, too. I've said, you guys are the dumb fan base of the day. So we try to cut it straight. And just when it comes to the rivalry, even looking past who won that game on Saturday, Ohio State's just had it during our lifetime. And that's all there is to it. Notre Dame fans, the same thing. They come up with these ridiculous statements. I have Notre Dame fans tweeting me that they led at halftime last year. Like that's an accomplishment, leading at halftime. It's unbelievable. So speaking of which, Notre Dame and USC, of course, hit the field this past Saturday. I think you're going to take a deeper dive on these teams later, but based on what you saw, is there anything to take away from those games?
Well, I think the biggest thing, talking about Notre Dame specifically, I had really three takeaways. One, that defense, you don't know how good they are because stopping Navy is an entirely different task than playing college football. I mean, it really is. Like it takes incredible discipline and attention to detail and focus and execution to stop that offense. And I mean, they held them to under 2 yards, around 2 yards a carry. And so that's unbelievable. I mean, 3 points late in the game, just a great job by the defense and a testament to Marcus Freeman and his staff at preparing the team. That doesn't mean they're going to be good on defense because just because you could stop Navy's triple option doesn't mean you can stop a spread offense. You need to have athletes for that. I think that was outstanding. It showed that they're a very disciplined group, a very tough group, and a very well-coached and coachable group. I think Sam Hartman looked outstanding. I mean, he was on point. He was calm, poised. He played outstanding. I think 4 incompletions in the entire game. The concerning thing about that game was you should have seen a difference in athlete. And I didn't really see it. I didn't see a ton of separation from receivers. Their starting running back's longest run was 13 yards. They only had one run over 20 yards. You would expect Notre Dame, if you get in the open field against a Navy athlete, a far lesser athlete, that you could make big plays, like you could have some electric plays. I didn't see that. I saw guys running decent routes, Sam Hartman with precision accuracy, making great throws, and it was very methodical, but you would hope to see explosions on offense. And I didn't feel team speed from Notre Dame. I'm worried they might not be fast enough to compete at the national level, like with the Ohio States and USCs. And I worry about their team speed. I do.
Well, you mentioned explosion. That's all USC, but it's on both sides of the ball. It's when their defense is on the field too.
Oh, absolutely. It's like when USC plays football, it's like the NBA All-Star game. Like, you're going to see a bunch of plays.
Yeah, I'm watching this game on Saturday, and I'm just wanting San Jose State to stay close because I've taken the points, and I'm watching this go back and forth, and I'm just envisioning next year, Minnesota, Iowa, some of those teams that love to just take everything out of the game, and how that's going to work against it's going to be a challenge for both sides.
It really is, and Alex Grinch, the defensive coordinator at USC, is a friend of mine. We work together at Ohio State. I have for the last 3-4 years just praised him as a football coach because he is a very intelligent, from my perspective in the year we worked together, just an outstanding football coach. And every year I defend him, and this year no different. And of course, against San Jose State, it was awful. I mean, kids out of position, coverages not executed right. And honestly, I don't know how they stop a dual threat quarterback because that kid from San Jose, he's an okay athlete, but it seemed like anytime he needed, anytime they did a decent job in coverage, he just took off and made them pay. It was disgusting. It was really, really bad defensive football.
Yeah, and now we come up on a situation where Fox is banking on Deion Sanders and this Colorado story to bring some eyeballs to the sets at noon Eastern time against TCU. We know that Travis Hunter is one of the best athletes in the country. Shedeur Sanders is dynamic. We know that Cormani McClain was one of the top recruited corners in the country. Like, they've got these pockets of top end guys, but you had to deal with the situation from year to year where you'd have your usual freshman class coming in and a couple transfers, but this is like new everything at Colorado. This should be fun to watch.
It's going to be. It reminds me so much of Mel Tucker year one, but it's on steroids, right? Like, I don't know how Vegas or you or any college football preview magazine, I don't know how you could even talk about Colorado and what they're going to do. What is it, like 80 new guys? Like, we have no idea, other than the superstars that you mentioned. How good is Colorado going to be? They could go 9-3, or they could go 0-12. Like, no idea what this team's going to be like, what training camp looked like, how the culture developed. I look at that game with TCU, and it's like TCU lost Max Duggan. They lost Garrett Riley. Chris put a bet in. He said on our show today, $2 is a parlay. Colorado and Nebraska to beat Minnesota. Colorado to beat TCU. Nebraska, $2 pays off $54. Like, and those are two games. You're like, those games could go either way. I have no idea. But for that kind of investment, I'm so excited to watch Colorado, because it's the luxury of college football, right? We're going to find out. Like, we get to find out.
I never play parlays. I stay far, far away from parlays. I tell people that all the time. They're sucker bets, but man, 2 for a 54 return on those two games.
Right. Like,
heck, yeah,
I'll
go
lose
for it.
$2. That's fine.
LSU, Florida State. That's probably the game of the week. You talk about trying to figure out two teams and trying to figure out who could possibly have an edge in this game. I know Mason Smith, the all-world LSU defensive tackle, he's out. He's suspended for the game. But otherwise, Jordan Travis, Jaden Daniels, they're similar quarterbacks, similar talent on both sides. They played a 1-point PAT block kick that ended the game last year, and now they just seem like they're similar, but they've just been raised about 15 spots in the rankings. So is there any way to get an edge on this one?
Obviously losing the D tackle, freshman All-American 2 years ago, got hurt against Florida State last year. Not having him is going to matter. But as I said on my show today, he wasn't there all year last year, and LSU went on to win the West. So D tackles matter, but they're rarely are they just so dominant that it's like, dang, we would have won if we had him. Is LSU's backup D tackle really that far off? I doubt it. But the thing that I'm most excited about this game is Florida State's not really a sleeper pick this year with the quarterback situation at Alabama and Ohio State. There's a bunch of teams that I think are in play. You can't really call Florida State a sleeper pick to make the playoffs. But I talked to two coaches at Florida State probably about halfway through training camp, and they both were like, Keon Coleman is going to be one of the best players in the United States of America, the transfer from Michigan State. And he was good at Michigan State, but he had Peyton Thorne, and no one really, a 5-win football team. No one really paid attention to him. They think he is just dominant. And so I'm excited to watch him. Jordan Travis, I have Florida State in the game, but I think LSU is going to be really good too. I think you're going to see two of the better teams, two top 10 teams in college football at the end of the year, battle it out in week one. And the luxury is, these teams are not the versions of themselves that are going to have to, prove that they're playoff caliber. You're trying to see who's the best coming out of training camp. The it's a long journey, and whoever loses the game certainly can still be relevant, but it's going to be exciting to see two really good football teams match up week one.
And just getting back to the Buckeyes, that's one of the reasons why I think there's some hope for them having a huge season, that there are things to work out and they should be able to talent their way through the first half of the schedule, but offensive line, secondary, quarterback, that they can kind of navigate it and be so much better in week 10, 11, 12 than they are right now.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It's really Notre Dame. That Notre Dame game, if they can just get through that on the road, first time starter, no matter who it is, if I'm right and it's Devin Brown or Kyle McCord, neither of them has taken a snap as a starting quarterback. If they can get out of South Bend with a win, I really feel great. The trap game on the schedule for me, I think Ryan gets it done in Ann Arbor this year. And that's based on nothing. Analytically, like I know what Michigan has coming back. JJ is being touted as this generational first round draft pick by Jim Harbaugh and everybody else. I just think Ryan finds a way to get it done this year. The game that I think they have the greatest chance of losing is on the road at Wisconsin. That is such a trap game after Penn State. Phil Longo, what he's doing with Tanner Mordecai, Luke Fickell in year one. They're going to have a more competent scheme on offense. They've always been good on offense, but you've never been worried about Wisconsin throwing the ball on you. That's the game I'm looking at like, whew, in Madison, that is going to be incredibly difficult.
And looking at the Ohio State-Michigan dynamic, this is where I'm at, Zach. All the check boxes go Michigan's direction, like the games at home. Like I look at every position unit and they're stable, they're set. They may not be at the very top elite, but we know what they are. They're just kind of looking for third and fourth cornerbacks, that sort of thing. Where Ohio State, it's an offensive line question mark. It's especially at the tackle positions. It's obviously secondary. It's quarterback. But when this all gets said and done, I just have this gut feeling that this team is just going to keep getting better and better and better and better. And that their top end talent, the Sawyers and the JTTs and the wide receiver group and all that. And people forget about the running back room that I know Michigan's got those too, but 5 deep is probably the best in the country. That I just think they're going to have it all together if they play their cards right. When November comes, they were going to be just as good as anybody in the country.
Yeah, no, I agree. It feels like just the opposite way last year. I mean, last year, Ohio State had everybody back. CJ Stroud's going to be a top 2 pick. It's at home. They're going to get revenge. They have the revenge factor on their side, chip on their shoulder. And all year I'm watching that team play and I'm saying, it just doesn't feel like CJ and this team has that grit to go win that game. That game has never, ever, ever been about who has more returning production, who's more talented ever. It's never been about that. It's about who wants it more and who's tougher. I'm not going to discount Michigan because they were tough as hell last year. It just feels like you said, I have a feeling that if Devin Brown's the guy, he brings energy, moxie, this team's, like you said, the top end talent, Marv is just going to be better. JTT is going to be better. This defense should be much improved. I really think Ohio State pulls it off. I really do.
And I know me being a Buckeye, picking the Buckeyes to win the Big Ten title, everybody's going to be all over me because I do think that the logical pick is Michigan. That's the safe, easy pick to make. But if you look through history, I know home field is huge and having 100,000 in the big house is an advantage, but it really doesn't prove out that way historically, that the road team wins just as much as the home team as long as the teams are even. It's not really historically proven that home field advantage in this series means much.
No. And you look at the dominant runs that Ohio State has had, at least the 20-year window where it was so dominant. Not only did they have all those intangible things that we talked about, they also were the more talented team when they went on the field every single time. Ohio State's still more talented than Michigan. Like they have more talent if they can just get that grit and toughness. And I've said it for 2 years when CJ was the quarterback, and I'll say it when Devin takes the reins here at Notre Dame at the latest. I think they have a quarterback to drive the ship and have that gritty, tough team. I don't think CJ was capable of doing that because he himself was not the toughest kid.
What do you say to people, Zach? Because I hear this every day, and I get it. Whoever wins the job's never thrown a pass against a good opponent. I totally get it. But we can start listing all the Ohio State quarterbacks and everybody just says Stroud and Haskins and Field. No, you can go back to Steve Bellisari. He's the last guy that didn't play for a championship. Every Ohio State quarterback either won a Big Ten championship or if it's Stroud played in the playoff, and they were first-time starting quarterbacks. 10 of them in a row.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And especially Michigan. I mean, that's week 12. If you told me you had Notre Dame week 1 on the road, okay, that's a little different. That kid's never taken a college snap and he's got to go play a top 10 team on the road. That's really tough. But by week 12, they're weathered. I mean, I don't want to call them vets yet, but they're close. I mean, they've had 11 weeks of games plus training camp to get ready for that moment. We've seen it happen too many times. But late in the season, freshmen that are playing are playing like sophomores.
Zach, I don't know what you've got in that prediction model over there. So I don't know what the secret sauce is, but I know you got picks over there on Patreon. I deliver picks on Patreon. Fortunately, off to a 2-0 start against the spread. So I made the right selections, but I will throw this out there. I don't know if you've come across this one. I've been tracking this for years. If you go through top 25 games in college football week to week, you can guarantee it's almost like clockwork, 20 or 25% of the game. So there's usually about 18 to 22 top 25 games. About 4 of them will be upsets for sure every week.
Oh yeah.
So you just got to find them.
Yeah. You just got to find them. That's the thing. And you usually, if you really dive deep into analytics, like matchups, passing defense, passing offense, like quarterback, what his field chart looks like versus what a team's defensive weaknesses are, you can usually find them most of the time, because a lot of these rankings are just nonsense of people that just don't really love and watch college football. It's like it's a job to them, both in the AP and the coaches poll. I've went on rants about this, Mark. I don't know how you feel about it. The coaches poll is the biggest waste of time ever, because I've been there. I watched how it goes. Every single program in the United States of America, there's a sports information director that fills it out, sets it on the head coach's desk in training camp, mind you, when he's incredibly busy, and he just glances at it, signs it, and gives it back. Like, don't think the coaches don't know who's good, because they're so focused on their own team. And 2, they're not filling them out. So these rankings are just, they're comical at this point.
And I'll add this to it, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you were right there to know, but I was there to know for 7 years in the SEC from the other side, because I was talking to SIDs from Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Bama every day. They were telling me the same thing. We fill out the poll unless their coach has a vendetta or needs to fix something and say, you know what, drop them to 10. Otherwise, do whatever you want, kind of thing.
Absolutely. Like Dabo when he ranked Ohio State so low before the playoffs. A head coach may have a sentence to give the SID, like, no. Hey, make sure Michigan's not ranked or whatever. They'll drop something like that on them. But the rest of the ballot is all filled out by an SID guy.
Zach, we appreciate you stopping by. Before we let you go, is there anything out there in regards to a dark horse, whether it's in the Big Ten or nationally, that maybe is flying under the radar that should get a little bit more attention than we're giving them?
I kind of said it before. This feels like a year where there's most of the dark horses are in the light, just because of the uncertainty at Bama at the quarterback position, Ohio State at the quarterback position. I mean, outside of Georgia, and I guess you could convince me Michigan, who you pretty much know what you're getting with those two teams. Outside of that, I mean, Penn State, I think somebody had Penn State in the Final Four. It's like, wow, you're putting a lot of weight into a freshman quarterback and a defense to really improve. I'm not ready to die on that hill. Florida State's been my team for really 2 years. 2 years ago, I know 3 coaches on staff really well, and they all just rave about Mike Norvell. And I think he got a raw deal coming in COVID year, not being able to even coach his team. And last year we kind of saw the fruits of that work, right? And so I don't know that they're much of a dark horse, but I really love Florida State this year.
You bring up Penn State. I got to say, their defense is loaded with future NFL players. They're fast. They're athletic. I do think Penn State, they're not a wild card. They're on everybody's radar, but obviously they haven't broken through and proven anything against the Big Two. But I'm looking at them. I'm looking at Texas A&M too, as just a real pendulum swing. Who knows what we're going to get out of them?
Yeah, A&M's the one that I could go fully in on, and maybe even being as outlandish as saying they could win the SEC West if I knew Jimbo wasn't going to touch the offense. If he gets involved in the offense, it's going to look like it's looked every year. Connor Wegman, I think, is going to be a really good player if Jimbo doesn't screw him up. They return, their blue chip ratio, the returning production, everything. And I know half of their coaches, Steve Adazio, the O-line coach, probably the best O-line coach I've ever been around. DJ Durkin, one of the best defensive coordinators I've ever been around. Like, there's no reason they aren't in the conversation with LSU and Alabama other than Jimbo needs to stop pretending like he knows offense.
He knew it 15 years ago.
Right. Yeah, he did. And he forgot to keep evolving with the game.
Yeah, it was kind of like Mark Richt. He knew it 15 years ago, but he
Right.
didn't keep it up. And I don't know. I guess it's part of what makes these coaches really good at what they do is they got huge egos and they think they know everything and can do everything. But if they would
That's
just stay out of their way, Jimbo, you're gonna get the credit if you win the West. Nobody's gonna care if you call the plays.
There's no greater example than Urban Meyer. None. When he went to Bowling Green and created that offense, it was, I mean, he was it. He was up at the top when it came to understanding offensive scheme. He didn't follow football or study it like you need to. And by the time he got to Florida, it was time to let other people run the offense. And he did that the rest of his career. He couldn't have called a game at Ohio State ever.
Awesome stuff, Zach. We appreciate you taking the time, man. And everyone knows Menace the Sports right here on YouTube every weekday at noon Eastern time. Zach, enjoy week one, man. Appreciate
you
you
too.
being
Thanks
here.
for having me.